podcast. I'm your host, Dan Dickow. You may know me as color analyst on the regional games with the current team. Have been doing that for 8 years or so. Some of you older folks may know me as an actual Gonzaga player. Well, if you know me as both, hopefully that means you enjoy some of the things that Gonzaga basketball has done, and hopefully I can provide some insight with not only my commentary but also our guest commentary to ways that separates Gonzaga basketball. Today's guest, he knows the Zags maybe as well, if not better than anybody else in the local area. The beat writer for the Spokesman Review has been covering them since the Austin Day era got started, I believe, back in 2008. From the Spokesman Review, Jim Meehan. Jim, how are you?
Hey, doing okay, Dan. I think you're right. That 08-09 season, I think.
Yeah, if you follow a team long enough, whether in your capacity or myself as a former player, now a fan, as a broadcast media member, some of the years just kind of start blending together. And unfortunately, you'll get random people on Twitter, how do you not remember this moment? Or how do you not remember this game or this play? And you just kind of like, hey, there's too many great memories within this program right now to recall every single one of them. What, in your mind, has been the biggest difference from when you started covering Gonzaga till the current day number one ranked Bulldog program?
Well, I would say definitely when I first started covering them, they were obviously a national entity. They were making the tournament every year. But about 2013-ish, when they got to the number one ranking, first time in school history, I believe they got a top seed that year, first time as well. 30-win season. And from that point on, 2013 to now, they've just gone through the roof, which is not easy when you're already on the national landscape. But, 30-win seasons almost every year, number one rankings, top seeds, a run to the championship game in 2017. Very good shot to win it, 3 times since. This year's team, the team that had it, last year's team would have been a number one seed before the tournament got canceled. And then that team that lost to Texas Tech in the Elite Eight, I've never seen a locker room as devastated as that one. I think they thought they were on their way to winning a national title. So the elevation of recruiting in that time, they took another step, a major step, and now they're right there, top 10 every year.
As a beat writer for Gonzaga, for Spokesman Review, you have to kind of play that fine balance of reporting fairly, asking for information, sometimes waiting for information, earning trust of Coach Few, the other members of the staff, as well as the players. How hard was it for you to really kind of get ingrained as, Jim's going to treat us fairly, whether it's a good story that needs to be celebrated, or maybe a story that there might be some concern of that needs to be shared just because it is of importance to people in Spokane?
It takes time. It's probably not unlike a player on Few's roster. You hear him talk about it all the time. Have to earn the coach's trust. And once you do, I think it kind of changes. You kind of have a relationship with them or what have you. For a player, it means playing time, and they'll live with a mistake or two and keep you in the rotation. But for me, I don't think it took a great deal of time, just because I'd actually covered a lot of their NCAA runs before that, going back to 99. I think I covered a couple of your NCAA tournament games. So, but, I think it's like anything else. You treat them fairly. You're straight with them. They're usually straight with you. You're right. Not all of it's, sunshine and lollipops. Some of it isn't on that side of the spectrum. But for the most part, with these guys, they don't have a lot of kids getting in trouble. They're winning games, year after year. Most of the stories are positive. and they've been very good about how they treat me, and I like to think I've done the same, vice versa.
The Spokesman Review has won multiple national awards for their coverage of Gonzaga basketball, and a lot of it has been because of Rob Curley, the editor, taking over and one, loving sports and college basketball in particular, but two, knowing the landscape of how people consume their media differently than in years past. How has that transition been for you, blending the traditional newspaper writing, but then also knowing that you've got to get quick things up, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's online, and just the difference of how people follow Gonzaga basketball?
It's a pretty big difference. We devote a lot of time, resources, people to Gonzaga basketball. In every facet. I mean, photo galleries of nearly every game that we staff. John Blanchette, one of the best columnists around, covers a ton of games for us as well. There's been a lot of times, I think, during the national championship year, we might have had 5 or 6 reporters, 1 news side, 2 photographers on site. I mean, that's a big bill at the end of the week when you stay a week in Arizona. So, yeah, we go at it pretty good, and there's not many days, if any, where there's not a Gonzaga story in the newspaper. And you're right, we do stuff on Twitter. I used to do stuff a few years ago. I called it 3 in the Key, where I just would grab a player at practice and 3 off the wall subjects, and we posted that, and that was pretty popular too. So I'm a busy guy, probably like yourself, but it's fun. I mean, you're covering a team that plays very good basketball, and that's always easy to watch.
Yeah, there's lots of great stories to cover with Gonzaga basketball just because of the overall culture of the program, the character of the players, and the quality of the play. But this year is different covering games. You've obviously, we see each other at the Kennel on regional broadcasts that I do, but I'm calling games from home. Very rarely am I going into airports now and traveling on site for games. How have you had to adjust the way you cover Gonzaga this year with COVID?
Well, I hate it, kind of, to be honest. I haven't been on a plane yet. Watching Gonzaga play Kansas in Fort Myers and watching it from my living room was just, it was nice to be home for Thanksgiving, but I would have preferred being on site. So you don't have any locker room access. So that was a huge part of how I gather info and, get to know the players. It's hard to get to know a player on a Zoom call. So that part's gone. There's not open practices. So really it's the result of Zoom calls after games is how I gather most of my information throughout the week, other than, calling various sources there at Gonzaga. So I don't like that part. I kind of got used to hopping on planes, and I think I figured it out. It's usually 35 to 40 nights a year in hotels and all around the West Coast, and even, back east when the Zags travels. So makes it a little harder to do the job. Not as much fun not knowing the guys as well as you're used to. But that's what we're living in. I would say in 2020, but now it's 2021 and it's the same thing. Hopefully by season's end, that will change.
Yeah, well, hopefully you're a Marriott Gold member, maybe working your way to Platinum, probably Alaska MVP Gold or 75K. I don't know, with all that amount of travel.
I'm close. I'm good on Marriott points. I'm just an MVP on Alaska. I probably don't rank with you on that one, but I have had I do keep things in the family that way when I travel.
That's awesome. I always love kind of trading loyalty program stories with guys who spend a lot of time on the road as well. But you've mentioned it's a little bit more difficult to earn players' trust or access right now, and obviously that's the case for everybody. But when you look back over the course of the time covering Gonzaga, has there been one player that has stuck out to you that maybe was the most insightful or the most truthful with their answers?
That's a great question. I would say Jeremy Pargo was about as straight shooter as you could get. I remember talking to him through good and bad, and it was usually good with Jeremy. I believe they had lost to Arizona. Chase Budinger, that crew down in Tucson, or no, not in Tucson, in Phoenix. And Jeremy had a little bit of a rough stretch, had some turnovers, and I can recall asking him in the locker room about it. And you try to word it as gently as you can, but you also have to ask the question. And I remember him just looking up at me and saying, "You mean my turnovers?" And not what I said, but he was just always, willing to take on anything, issue wise, good or bad. And with his personality, with his personality, he was one of the greatest guys to deal with that's come through there. Rob Sackery, same way. His personality barely could fit in the locker room, and just a great guy to deal with. Stephen Gray, same thing, just bright, funny, could talk to him about anything. Chemic Karnowski was, from the first year he showed up from Poland to the end of his career, 5 years because of the injury, go-to guy in the locker room. And Corey Kispert on this team. I keep saying it, I'm only half joking. When he's the AD or the head coach in 15 years at Gonzaga, don't be surprised. He is a world-class off the court and a heck of a player on it. So those are the guys that stick out.
You name some tremendous people there that have had big parts of Gonzaga's program, Pargo on down to the most recent Kispert. But Coach Few, he's the head man. He kind of sets the tone. For people that don't really know him on a day-to-day basis, explain Coach Few's personality in both what you see around the team, but then how he handles or accepts his responsibility with the media.
Well, I don't get to see him around the team other than games. I haven't been to a practice in a long time, but I do see him at walkthroughs on the road. Used to go through to get my credential and get set up, and kind of what you see is what you get. He is as competitive as anybody I've ever met. I think people don't quite realize that he is competitive. And then I would say, as far as media, most of the Zoom calls now, there's 20 to 30 people on there, so you only get in one question. In the old days, last year and before, there was a kind of a group session with TV, radio, print outside the locker room. Mark would come out and he'd answer, questions from the TV first. And after that, he was always great about it. He basically would just start to walk to the locker room and stop. And if I had anything I needed, personally, I could get a few minutes with him that way. That was very helpful. I mean, that's probably half the quotes you see in game stories or features are from that session, not the bigger ones. So very good that way. It's not easy to get a hold of him, I'll be honest.
Well, he doesn't have email.
Well, yeah. And I, if something big happens, I can probably get a hold of him, but day-to-day stuff, it's not as easy to get a hold of him. That's just the way it is. That's the way it's always been. But he's, if I need him, I feel like he'll give me a call back.
Yeah, he is a straight shooter. I will agree with that. He is as competitive as they get. And I think that is evidenced by you see the growth of the program over the last however many years. Yeah. Oh, we're ranked number one. Okay. What's next? What can we do next? We get to a Final Four. Okay. We want to get back. They've had two teams or a team since that's had a legitimate chance to get back. Now it's a number one ranked team. And quite frankly, they have a good shot at running the table. I mean, I don't want to be that first guy that puts it out there, but it's true. If you look at the schedule, they handled one of what would probably be their 4 biggest tests before the NCAA tournament in BYU. When you cover the team as a fan and you see all these different milestones you cover the team as a journalist, you see these milestones covered. Do you also secretly cheer them on as a fan because you're connected to the program? You get to know these guys deeper than just an average fan or journalist.
Yeah, no, I get asked that all the time. Not really. I mean, I'm there to do a job. That's what I get paid for. That's also what I love doing, and I've done it for 30 years. So you naturally get closer to people you've been around that long. Gonzaga is kind of unique. Mike Roth has been there this whole time. Mark Few has been there the whole time. Tommy Lloyd is 20 plus years in as an assistant coach. Brian Michelson, same way. So those folks you get to know very well, over the years. I will say how they've gone about it, the winning and being in the tournament every year. It's probably easier to cover a winning team than a losing team. I would say that. And but as far as being a fan, that's not part of the sorry, that's not part of the job. But as I said earlier, when you watch high level basketball night after night, that's pretty cool aspect of the job right there.
It is, and I love that answer. And I can have some common ground with you in that you cover the team not as a fan, but it's part of your job. And as a color analyst for the regional games, yes, we're a Gonzaga crew. I've always tried to call it straight down the middle. And unfortunately, there are quite a few Spokane people and Gonzaga fans that think, hey, you don't like the Zags, you don't like this team, this player or that player. No, that's not the case. My job is to call as the analyst what I see, what was good, what was bad, maybe give you some nuances to the game. And in turn, that has allowed me to have some more opportunities calling games on different networks, which is for me is my end goal, is to continue to grow my career. When you look at the program and all of the places that you've been and all of the games that you've covered, do you have a favorite moment?
I have a favorite place, Maui. Let's do that again every 4 years. That gym it's like any high school gym you'll walk into, but who cares? That is the best spot on earth for basketball for about 3 days. Bahamas, right there with it. Caliber of field there has grown greatly too. So those 2 places. Favorite game I covered? That's tough. They've had some unbelievable ones. Wasn't the national title game. My ears are still ringing from the whistles in the second half. At South, the Final Four game against South Carolina was pretty. That was pretty cool to sit there with 70,000 people. Sit 30 feet from the court behind. I think it was Nance and Raftery and Grant Hill at that time. That was a very cool game to cover. I mean, I've been lucky. I've covered Super Bowls. I covered the NCAA title game when UCLA won at the Kingdom. But there's so many memorable Zag games through the years. Just to get to the Final Four that year, and it wasn't it was the Sweet 16 game, West Virginia. Jordan Matthews hitting that 3 to kind of secure that game. That sends a little electricity through your veins when you're sitting there 50 feet away. So that's probably one of the biggest games, probably one of the biggest wins. The win over Maui, or over Duke in Maui. Rui gets the late basket, and then they block the shot at the other end. Those were all big time games, and you've been around here. That list is pretty long now. They've grown that thing out to be about 30 games long of just memorable basketball games.
Yeah, you're right. The list of memorable games and moments in Gonzaga history is pretty long, and hopefully it continues to grow this season as it looks like it will. So, Jim, I hope for everybody that we can get past this phase and we can get you back in with better access because you've been doing a tremendous job without your typical access. But we can all be back in the gym enjoying a Gonzaga run to the NCAA tournament. And who knows, maybe it does lead to another Final Four. So, Jim, I appreciate you joining.
Thanks, Dan. Anytime.
This week's Bulldog broadcast brought to you on the Field of 68 network by myself, Dan Dickow, is a little different. We have two guests. The first guest, Jim Meehan from the Spokesman Review, does a tremendous job covering Gonzaga basketball, especially in these times with COVID where he doesn't have the access like he typically does. The second part is one that is a little partial to me. It's a good friend of mine from when I was in college. He's someone who can tell a lot of the backstory of that initial Elite Eight team that started Gonzaga on this magical run where 20 years later, we are still talking about the program. They're number one ranked preseason. They've been ranked number one all season long, almost unanimously. Could be a very strong consideration for the conversation to be an undefeated team as we keep moving through the season. But my guest in part two, Eric Edelstein, who is a big part of that initial Elite Eight group and knowing the guys and about how the program got to be where it is because of the guys part of the program. He's here to tell a couple stories and in particular really support one of those Zags from that Elite Eight team who, quite frankly, listeners, if you're out there, we would appreciate Zag Nation getting behind and really helping out this fellow Zag, this person that could use some support right now. So, Eric, thank you for joining. I apologize for the long intro, but whenever I get to see you, whether it's in person or whether it's through the Zoom screen, I feel like I need to give you justice and really give you a great intro. So with no further ado, Eric Edelstein, how you doing, bud?
It's so good to see you, Dan. And I'll never forget when I was there, when Richie Fromm said, we're going down to the gym. We're going to get my friend Dan to transfer here. And meeting another kid from Vancouver, Washington, Huskies warm-ups. And sometimes I don't think Richie Fromm gets enough credit for really showing you. I just remember you looking like, you can get a key to the gym. You can come down here whenever you want. And then history started being made.
You know, that's so awesome that, you make that comment. And for anybody out there listening, my career at the University of Washington wasn't necessarily going the way that I wanted. Gonzaga was the perfect landing opportunity for me, and thankfully it worked out. But there were guys like Richie Fromm, high school and AAU teammates and rivals that helped kind of show me what Gonzaga was all about. And oddly enough, you are 100% correct in saying that. A night before, as a member of the University of Washington Huskies, we played GU. Richie and I were in the gym shooting at the old kennel. And you walked in and said, I can't wait for you to be the next Gonzaga point guard after Matt Santangelo. And I did give you a really weird look, and I gave Richie the same look, like, who is this guy? What's he talking about? And years later, we are great friends, and you have kind of one of those insights to the kickoff, the start of that Elite Eight run team that really helped the program become what it is. All these years later, what is it about that Elite Eight team that was so special?
Well, the word you said was magic, and it was just lightning in a bottle. And so much of it, and you know these guys, they were just characters. They were hilarious. And I came in as the student play-by-play announcer. And people have a difficult time doing this when I'm like, I was a TV announcer during Gonzaga's run. And like, well, the student, I'm like, no. I was the TV announcer because Gonzaga did not have a television deal. So there would be 2 or 3 Fox Sports games a year, and that was it. And the first year I did it, the only people watching were my great aunt Lillian's friends at a nursing home and people that were unfortunately, I think, too drunk to make it to the game because the games weren't even sold out. And then my second year there, Gonzaga blew up, and it was all kind of because of this alchemy of personalities. Where it's just such special guys. And I was a very biased announcer because my roommates were on the team. But Gonzaga is about, those guys woke me up for class. And they're so special. And you look at them, they're just characters. You have Mike Nielsen and Ryan Floyd and Richie Fromm and Quentin Hall. and the guy we're going to talk about today, Jeremy Eaton. And Jeremy Eaton was kind of amazing because, Dan, you know, as somebody who's been on so many great teams, you need those guys that are bridges between different kinds of people. And Jeremy Eaton was a 7-foot calf roper from Benton City, Washington, or as Benton Town, as we would tease him. But he loved hip hop. The fellas would call him Rodeo Loke. And he was just one of those special guys and just a hilarious character. And that team was just populated by them. And it kind of set the tone for the kind of teams and people Gonzaga would recruit going forward, of like, it's not just going to be boring athletes. It's going to be legends and characters and hilarious people. And I love, Dan, when we all get together, it's like no time has gone by. And it's just a bunch of hilarious, really smart guys. And the way Coach Few has managed to grow this program and still recruiting those kind of guys, it just makes me so proud, because a lot of people get greedy. The gold rush happens and they kind of lose their soul. And somehow Gonzaga, coach is always so cool and lets me come in and meet the guys and talk to them on the road. And they're just such good human beings consistently.
Yeah, you're right. Coach Few has done a magical job of continuing to keep the same type of character involved with the program from when the initial stages happened. He was only assistant coach there. And I'm going to ask you in a minute about Coach Few's hiring day, because it's magical. It's unbelievable, the story that you have in regards to his first day as the head coach of Gonzaga basketball. But I want to stay on the topic of that Elite Eight team really quickly. You talked about some really good players: Matt Santangelo, Quentin Hall, Richie Fromm, Mike Nilsson, Ryan Floyd. Great players, good people that kickstarted this off. But Jeremy Eaton was kind of an unsung hero on that team. He's going through a difficult time right now, and Gonzaga family tries to help each other out. And he's going through some tough times. And I know you're willing and you're able to share how we can help Jeremy with the things that he's going through right now. Can you give us a little bit of the backstory and how people can help if they're able to and interested in helping?
Yes. So a lot of people know Jeremy Eaton. They love Jeremy Eaton, and he was a huge and vital part of that team. He was also really one of the first people to establish the Gonzaga tradition of redshirting, where he transferred in, took a year off for individual work and to get better. And Jeremy was kind of ahead of his time. He could handle the ball. He could shoot. He was athletic. Jeremy is a joker, but he's a lot smarter than he lets people let on. And he's also a hilarious guy. And this is really the first time that this family's kind of had to deal with something like this, where it came out last week that Jeremy has cancer, and a aggressive form of cancer. And they're saying it's, for now, inoperable, but he's going to be very aggressive in how he handles it. And he's going to be starting radiation treatment soon. So his sister started a GoFundMe without asking Jeremy, knowing he would be pretty upset and that he's very stubborn about this stuff, but he doesn't have insurance. He owns his own business. You know, all the problems we have with health insurance, this just kind of shows up here because Jeremy's about to begin aggressive chemotherapy and absolutely digging in for the fight of his life, but we want to fundraise for him. So if everybody could please contribute to Jeremy's GoFundMe, which is Jeremy's Cancer Fund, and his sister just set it up. And then I'm thrilled to announce here, we are going to be doing a fundraiser via Zoom with the Spokesman Review after the conference tournament and before March Madness, where we're going to be doing a giant reunion of everybody Jeremy played with and the first ever big reunion of that Elite Eight team. And I'm thrilled. I got a yes from you, Dan. I think we're going to do a special panel because Jeremy, like yourself, announced games with me on GUTV. Jeremy announced women's volleyball. Jeremy announced women's basketball. And we're going to be having 4 or 5 Zags that were actually announcing games because they were in the broadcast program under the great Father Don Heiberger. And that just also tells you a little bit about what a personality Jeremy had, because, you know, people would certainly talk about his commentary a lot more than my play-by-play.
Well, Jeremy and I were never teammates. I played against him when I was at UW when we played GU. But I was around him plenty because he was on that team that, you know, kind of sparked the interest in me to transfer. And things worked out incredibly well for me at GU. And we want to try to help Jeremy in any way we can because he is such a an unsung hero of the Gonzaga program, and we try to stick together when possible. Those guys on that 99 Elite Eight team, they inspired you to kind of really believe in yourself, dig in, have confidence in yourself, and go after your goals and dreams. You are now an actor down in Hollywood. You've had some good roles in recurring sitcoms. You are a voiceover actor. Baby Shark, We Bare Bears are a couple of your big ones. But I think my family's and my kids' favorite part for you was when you were in Jurassic World, I believe it was, and you were eaten by a T-Rex. Can you share us a little bit about how your confidence was grown by being around those Gonzaga players, because they weren't expected to do anything, and going down and moving down to Hollywood, it's hard to break in. You have to have a confidence and a self-awareness about yourself that you're going to make things work.
And to be blunt, Dan, I did not have that confidence, and I did not have that self-awareness before Gonzaga. I pinch myself all the time. This worked out down here, but none of this happens if I had guys that I watched achieve their dream in front of me. And not only that, I was a work in progress when I went away to Spokane. These guys really did the finishing work and raising me of like, dude, you got one pair of black Nikes and one pair of Cat. Come on, get up for class. Let's go. And they're just such special people. But I always say, in terms of watching a dream come true, I had a cheat code because I watched Richie Fromm go from sleeping on my couch 3 weeks after 9/11 and getting cut by the B League in Korea to making the NBA. I watched you, Dan, go from when I came down to visit you and meet you for the first time at the gym. Things weren't going well for you at UW. And then I get to come down here and watch you and Richie Fromm in the same backcourt for the Clippers, both from Vancouver, Washington. And I didn't tell you this at the time. I didn't really even have the money to pay for parking. And I remember the one time I hung out with a couple of your teammates on New Orleans afterward. And I'm like, God, now Dan's going to know I park on the street to get here and go through a really shady alley. But you and Richie hardwired to me that dreams can come true. I mean, it's my two good buddies from Vancouver, Washington. And that team was just so magical. And I also learned a ton from Coach Few, where Coach Few is always, he's got a few mantras. And then we also had a great guy, Father Tony, that was in the end of our bench. And he would say patience and basics. And Coach Few is always about adding value. Where you can contribute. So let's be honest, Dan, I'm probably not going to come in and be a leading man. But I come in and try to make everyone around me better. And I didn't move down here planning on dying and everything. But that's how I add value. Nobody can die quite like me. So I'm kind of a rebounder and post defender and passing big man Arvydas Sabonis style. I have to get that in of Hollywood, where I'm just, I'm a role player, but I'm thrilled to do it. But a big part, I see a lot of people that have difficulty adjusting, not being the star. Wherever they came from, they were the funniest guy. And for me, Gonzaga really showed me and gave me a blueprint and a map for how to succeed that I did not have when I came there. So I'm always eternally grateful to that team. And they just kind of adopted me. I got to go along on the Elite Eight run, and Coach Few let me go and didn't tell Munson until we were at baggage claim. And Munson's like, do not keep the guys up at night. I am watching like a hawk. And then I remember when we were playing UConn, Mike Roth came up and said, hey, we're going to have you MC a rally, win or lose, when we get back to campus, because it was our first time on a private plane. And I was like, okay, but I mean, what's it going to be like if we lose? We land that plane and we hear a giant noise. And it was thousands of people at the airport, then a police escort to campus. And I get chills talking about it now, but you just saw immediately how much that team changed Gonzaga, how much that team changed Spokane. And it's only grown in the best and most magical way.
I love that insight. You have so many stories. You have so much insight to the early stages of the program, but also the individuals that were a part of that program. Coach Few was an assistant when you were around. He is now the head man, and he's bound for the Hall of Fame, all-time winningest percentage coach of all time. He's one of the best, and we both know him well, and we know him in a different way off the court. You were there the day that he was announced as the head coach when Dan Monson headed off to Minnesota. You have an unbelievable story when it comes to hiring day for Mark Few. What is that story?
This is an amazing story. And so they had me coaching basketball camp, even though I had no business coaching camp, and I averaged 2.1 points per game in the C League and intramurals. And then I'm coaching John Stockton's kids. So, and then for high school team camp, I'm driving vans. And so the day Coach Few gets hired, there is a media swell on him. And I'm driving kids to local high schools, dropping them off. And he's like, and there's so many legendary high school coaches that are part of team camp. So he's like, hey, big fella, when you're done for the day and I'm done with all this media stuff, come on in. Let's have a coldie and hang out. So I'm like, no problem. This sounds amazing. So I have one more van load to drop off. Now, as you know, Dan, I was a lot heavier and a lot lazier back then. I could have dropped off the load right at like the driveway there, but no, I had to, because I was above the law and was allowed to drive the van on the grass to Martin Center. I decided I'm going to drop them off right at the glass doors. So then as I reverse, I hear a ping, and then it sounds like the biggest metal oak tree being felled in the forest. It makes the most horrible noise you've ever heard. I knocked over a light pole. This light pole, there's wires sparking, and then all of a sudden, you cannot write this, the power goes out across campus. So the old me, I maybe would not have been accountable, but I learned from Coach, you got to be responsible for your actions. So I move the van, I walk in, and Coach Few is alone in a giant room with a Miller Lite. And then all the power's out. And I'm like, Coach, I screwed up. It's my fault that the power's out. I just knocked down a light pole with the van. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for whatever damage there is. This is all my fault. And he just looked at me and he got a smile on his face. He's like, well, big fella, they say stuff happens. Have a beer. So I just sat down with him and we had a beer in the dark. And I found out later, he never told me this, they had to pay like $15,000 to the university for me being too lazy to just drive my van in the driveway. He never told me. He never made me feel bad. And we just kind of sat there together the day he got hired. And that is exactly who Coach Few is. And that is why he's a Hall of Famer, Dan.
That is why he's a Hall of Famer. In addition to, the hundreds and hundreds of wins that he's had, and hopefully at some point a national title to go to that resume. But the way he handled you and his initial day as the head coach, that was an epic beginning to a coaching career at the college level. Now, as a actor down in Hollywood, somebody who's done on-camera work, who's done off-camera voice work, you've had to kind of manipulate your voice and do different things over the time. One of the ways that you and I got to know each other in college was through your Bill Walton impersonation. I now work as a color analyst, and I don't have the amount of games or the great games that Bill Walton has, but he's kind of a lightning rod when it comes to fans watching college basketball. You like him, you love him, or you don't like him. There's kind of no in between with his analyzing of games. You have an amazing Bill Walton impersonation. I want to give you the opportunity on the Field of 68 network to give us your best Bill Walton impersonation talking about Gonzaga basketball.
I love this, and I'll bring it all home because my career started, and I first started doing shows. I would end Gonzaga camp. Coach Few would give me the mic, and I would do Chris Farley doing Matt Foley. I would do the Croc Hunter, and I would do Bill Walton. And I've always loved Bill Walton. He's a hero. I grew up a Trailblazers fan. It was so amazing watching you play for the Trailblazers. But last year, I see my phone lights up. It says Coach Few. That's one of those you always answer, Coach Few. And then I hear the voice. Coach Few is with Bill Walton. He put him on. Hello, who is this? I'm hearing Big Ed. I'm hearing Eric. What is your name, please? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, Bill, I'm your biggest fan. I saw you at some concerts. I saw you at Neil Young and Eugene, and I saw you at Dead & Company at Hollywood Bowl. Oh, Dead & Company. I just saw them at the Hollywood Bowl. You should have been there. With fantastic. John Mayer, the new Jerry Garcia. And I could not believe Coach put me on and I got to talk to him. So I think right now what Bill would probably say is, look, we have a fantastic player. We have Jalen Suggs. He's absolutely transcendent. This is a Jerry Garcia. This is a Phil Lesh. This is a Bill Kreutzmann channeling Arvydas Sabonis, channeling the great players, channeling Dan Dickow. Please, I would much rather announce games with Dan Dickow than Dave Pasch any day of the week. It is Dave, right? Bill's the king. Bill is the king. It's so funny to me, and it also shows why Gonzaga is so special, because all these classic storied teams, he'll come in and announce their games. North Carolina fans are so furious because they're like, why is he talking about the players? Like, what? You can see the game. I'm not here to talk about the game. I'm here to talk about Paul Simon at the Greek Theater. Please. He played You Can Call Me Out twice. North Carolina fans get so mad. Other storied teams get so mad. And Gonzaga used to have a love-hate relationship with him. He's like, Gonzaga, please. Who they played? Sisters of the Poor? Pacific? Please. Well, then Coach Few leaned on him to come up and announce a game. He came up to the kennel and saw it was the greatest atmosphere in college basketball. And now there's no bigger Gonzaga convert than Bill Walton. And that's how he ended up talking to Coach Few. They came out, they rode bikes together. And then Coach Few was like, yeah, he said he met his wife at church. I guess he's a religious guy. I know that means, please, I met her at a Grateful Dead show. We were both in the pit. Jerry played for 13 minutes, just one solo of Sugar Ray. It was magical. It was church. God is wherever you find him, Dan. Please, he's in the trees. But I love that Bill Walton went from calling Gonzaga, who have they played, Sisters of the Poor, to now anytime they mention Gonzaga, just the last game. He's my favorite show. So whatever games Walton is announcing, that's what I watch. And my wife kind of knows it's Walton time. But just the other day, he's like, oh, please, Mark Few, he's so special what he's done for Spokane. Get me to Jack and Dan's. Let's go. Let me get on my bike and ride with Mark Few anywhere. He's a fisherman. He's bringing in the biggest fish there is. Look at Timmy. Look at Suggs. Timmy looks 27 years old with that beard.
Well, big fella, I love spending time with you. Unfortunately, it's rare these days because you live in LA. I'm in the Spokane area. I appreciate you joining, but more importantly, I appreciate you sharing the Jeremy Eaton story and how people can help. So we will make sure to get that GoFundMe up as part of a link with this podcast.
Oh, awesome.
Please text it to me and I'll make sure it gets included with everything. And again, there's nothing like being a Zag, and you are a true example of being a Zag off of the hardwood. So thanks again, big fella.
You're the best, Dan, and Jeremy's got this. So let's all send him our love, our prayers. I'll send you the GoFundMe, and then we'll let you know about our big 99 reunion show to benefit the great Jeremy Eaton. But it was so good to see you, friend. Best for the whole fam. Tell him the man he says hello.